Hey. It's okay. It's already completely set up.
Have you seen the messages regarding like the technical stuff that needs to be picked up in the other building?
I will do that after this finished.
Yeah. We can also help you, so that wouldn't be a problem because asked Janine.
Are you both here during this?
Yeah.
So maybe I can just use the time because once that's set up, we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
There's usually nobody in these Zoom sessions.
Yeah.
The recording is just going, and maybe the only thing to do is to adjust the camera in case somebody's moving. But I've also set it up in a way that basically everything is obvious. So yeah, we can just enjoy the session. And maybe I just use the time to collect everything while you guys look that it's not, I don't know, exploding. I have no idea what should happen. Yes, nice. But I have to read into it. I basically ignored it completely today.
It's like the last few messages.
Because the name was
okay. Yeah, I met her when she was leaving. Okay, yeah, I can do that.
Should be only the stuff like in the basement, I think, on first floor.
Okay, I will just check every room.
Can I? Yeah, maybe we can put over there.
That's better. So.
I didn't expect next.
Well, it could be misunderstand, but my brain considers that indigenous factor of
yeah.
Well, but so many people feel like so many over there. Oh, they will come. Wouldn't be worried that people tend to some of them for sure because so to go to my guess. But I found to just after only we know what oh, it's good. So it's exactly full. We should fix yeah, because I work with the presentation, okay, I know, but I can do the session, so then
I learned during the I have program to control myself.
Yes, in 10 minutes. Translated. That's true. That's true. There's some regular participant.
There is only one. There are also other universities, but they have not focused on specifications, for example, change to university or many students are in but university has well, not faculty, yeah. Because of the installation of the monuments, faculty will follow disciplines like geology, political science, public administration.
Hello, hello.
What do you want? Do you need, you sit down?
Well, we have 3 presentations in a row, so I'll introduce with this one, then speakers come here. Then we get together, sit down here for the
For the questions to bring it down, and then I think that's better to have 2 there.
I think one is fine. You can have one at each side. I can just move this one.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Just. So, will you check? It's just oh, nee, it's okay.
What's that black ball?
It's
I'm sure.
I tried to create the movement. People were just very happy to be in the sun.
Oh yeah, it was like
Yeah.
I stopped freezing after lunch.
Oh my God, yeah, it was really cold in the rooms.
Yeah,
I'll make it back.
Ich habe wahrscheinlich so 5 Minuten. Ja. Gut, ich mache 5 Minuten Einführung und dann stelle ich dich kurz vor. Gut. Are you around for this?
we don't.
Warm welcome to this final plenary, final session, final 1.5 hours. Striking to see how fast this event has passed till now. Very nice to see that you're still here. Hope this is a good sign also for the closing party tonight. For this closing panel, we have thought about a debate. We have asked 3 independent researchers to provide us with short inputs as critical observers about potential contributions of CEE regional studies to the international debate based on their particular experience, based on their networks, based on their different also national, cultural, and disciplinary backgrounds. So of course, this will be a little bit selective to start with, but we will open the discussion and have enough space also to accommodate your impressions, your feedback. With this plenary discussion, we want to come back to some of the thoughts that we presented in the opening of this conference, and we aim to focus a little bit on the West-East, East-West conversations on conceptual, theoretical, and empirical work in, with, and about the Central and Eastern European region, if there is something like the Central and Eastern European region. We want to focus the value of the research that you do, that we do, that we discuss together, focus on its shortcomings, and particularly also avenues for the future research agendas of the regional studies community. In our conference call, and also concerning this closing plenary, we kind of pre-assume that there is a divide in scholarship with the hegemony of Western Northern theorizing and scholarship. One of our conference questions is how to bridge this kind of divide. We now want to engage in the next 1.5 hours or so based on critical short inputs about potential contributions to the international debate and academic interplay across different research and policy cultures. To prepare for this session, we've asked Joseph Benedict, Maciej Smetkowski, and Petya from Bulgaria, Maciej from Poland, Joseph from Romania, to share with us their general reflections on these questions, reflections based on their experience in their home countries, their own research networks, which are of course also transcending boundaries, and also reflections on the contents of this very conference. So as a general reflection on the overall academic debate, we would like to discuss to what extent this kind of divide exists, has been increasing or maybe even decreasing over the past two decades, and impacts regional studies in and from your perspectives. How would we judge the standing of our research in general in the regional studies community, and maybe also its wider political impact? Second, I have also asked our speakers for reflections from their country perspective, from their network perspective. So how would they judge the state of geographical research from within the region versus Western Northern scholarship? How appealing would you judge is research in and about Central and Eastern Europe to researchers in your country? Are conceptual contributions from these studies sufficiently produced and also recognized in academia, in the international debate? And to make it even more complex, as a third point, we also invited the 3 speakers to come for reflections on the conference themes, inputs, and discussions, what you heard in the past 2 days. So what kind of contributions can we identify from these debates to conceptual advancement of regional studies and geographical research in general? What is lacking? What should be addressed more in future research? What kind of impulses can emerge to advance regional studies in CEE? So you see, this is a really big agenda. We will not be able to address this fully. We can just kickstart a wider debate, and we hope that this kind of debate will continue in our community and also beyond. So in this respect, we're very curious to hear your inputs. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation. It's been a big task. We're very curious to learn from you. Let us start with Joseph Benedict as our first speaker. Joseph is Professor of Human Geography at the Babeș-Bolyai University in Cluj, Romania, and at the same time also Director of the Research Center of Spatial Economics attached to the Faculty of Economics in Miskolc in Hungary. Joseph, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I focus my input on some facts which are reflecting how knowledge in the field of regional studies is produced and is published across the journals, across the main journals from regional studies. And I have focused particularly on the position of the Central and Eastern European countries in the publication records of regional studies journals indexed in Web of Science. I will present these facts, and based on these statistics, I propose to have some reflections also about these facts and about the future. So I will present only some publication results which are related to the journals published by the Regional Studies Association. I should add that I have done this research also for other journals from the field, and there are not important or significant differences among the results. So I will be not able to present every journal, and because it is a conference of the RSA, I propose you to focus on the journals of the RSA. I have recorded the publication fields, the publication results from the Web of Science for the whole period of the publications since they have appeared. Results are showing, let's say, a weight of 1 up to 2% of the total publications are generated by authors from Central and Eastern European countries. I understand I included in this group Poland, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, Croatia, Romania, and Bulgaria. So we can discuss also about this delimitation, but this is what I understood on the Central and Eastern Europe. There are small differences between the journals and between the countries contributing to these journals. For instance, in the case of the regional studies from more than 6,000 publications across the history, 75 have been published by authors connected to institutions located in Central and Eastern European countries. That means around 1.2%. What is interesting is that if we download the results for the last 12 years, we can see an upwards tendency. And this share doubles and is around 3 or 3.5% for the last 12 years. That means from 2,000 publications, 62 have been realized by authors from Central and Eastern Europe. It is the statistic for the last 12 years. It means that the situation is improving, and the presence of the professional communities from these countries, particularly in this publication, is increasing, which is a good sign. Probably for the lower shares from the previous period, the Cold War period had also an important role when the communities from Central and Eastern Europe was basically isolated or cut down from the international flow of knowledge. If you look on individual countries, we can see Poland and Hungary as the greatest or the biggest contributors to regional studies across all periods for the last 12 years, as for the whole period as well. And Czech Republic on the third place. If we switch to other journals, we have the same shares and almost the same tendency. Let's give some facts. Territory, politics, and governance from more than 400 publications. Central and Eastern European authors have published 10. The order is a little bit other. Czech Republic is leading. What is interesting, this journal is based mostly on text-like analysis. Discourse is very important, where language is also probably very important. And it follows Hungary, Romania with lower figures. Much more interesting is the situation for spatial economic analysis. From 400 publications, only Poland is represented from Central and Eastern Europe with 6 publications. Very interesting. There's a very quantitative oriented journal. And it looks like that this is not so much popular and it is not attracting other authors from the region. It is also interesting to see area development and policy with 155 articles, and the only country represented is Hungary with 1 contribution. Of course, it is including basically the BRICS countries, or countries belonging to the BRICS. And China is on the first place among these publications. If we take also into consideration journals others than those related to RSA, we can observe the same figures, the same statistics. Which is behind? What is behind? What could be? What are the driving factors for generating this knowledge dissemination, let's say, and what are the future prospects? And these are the 2 directions I would like to address in the following minutes. Language is not everything, of course. It is important. I would say that important is also what kind of what the degree of institutionalization of regional studies, of the field of regional studies in these countries. If you look on these statistics, you can see that Poland and Hungary are leading, and it is not by accident. If you look, both countries have RSA sections in their countries, and also the regional science or ERSA sections are very strong. That means that, of course, because of some country-specific conditions which cannot be addressed right now, but which are very interesting, has led to the building of strong scientific communities dedicated to the field of regional studies and regional science. It does not mean that the other national communities from Central and Eastern Europe have no added value, but their level of institutionalization is lower if we look only on these facts. Of course, this institutionalization can be measured also by other figures, like the number of PhD programs or the number of master programs or even bachelor programs, the position of the field of the regional science. of the regional studies in the science policy or in the higher education in each country. So I would say language is important, but it is not everything. Equally important, or even more important, is the level of institutionalization and the presence of regional studies at universities and research institutions. I think also that a major driver for this output is also the international position of the higher education institutions from these countries. If you look on the QS ranking of the universities, one of the most prestigious international ranking of the universities, among the top 500 universities, you can find 3 from the Czech Republic, 3 from Poland, and if I recall exactly, 2 from Hungary. These are also the 3, let's say, most important communities contributing to this publication statistics, and that means that the internationalization of the universities and the university programs are equally important in producing knowledge, valuable knowledge in the field of regional studies. What are the future prospects? I would say that we can take the best examples. We have some countries which had a fulminant evolution in these publication records. For instance, in the case of regional studies, for the whole examined period, Italy is on the 4th position. But if we examine only the last 12 years, Italy is in the 2nd position, close to, let's say, immediately after England. That means that the regional studies community in Italy is doing something very, which is very interesting and which can serve as best practice. Maybe we have to look closer what is doing the community so well in Italy. Or we have also the same situation in Spain. Spain is positioned on the 4th position if you look at the statistics of the last 12 years. So Italy, Spain. Or we have to look at China. China had also upwards tendency, also related to the fact that China as case study became so interesting, of course. But what is so interesting in Central and Eastern Europe to be studied and to be offered for the regional studies community? This is also, I think, an important question which will be surely addressed by the other contributors. Thank you very much. That is my message.
Thank you, Joseph, for the input. Microphone's working. I will immediately jump to the next speaker, Maciej Smetkowski, who is Associate Professor at the Center for European Regional and Local Studies at the University of Warsaw in Poland. And he has worked extensively, and many of you might know his work, on regional development and regional policy in Central and Eastern Europe. And I'll immediately give you the word.
Thank you, Thilo. Thank you all for coming for this last session. Well, thank you for opportunity to make some reflections on the main theme of our conference, so bridging old and new divides. So in my presentation, I would like to address 3 questions. First, what are the main economic divisions in Europe? And even more importantly, how they changed in recent years, because sometimes process is more important than the level. Second thing is, well, we have cohesion policy. What could cohesion policy do to reduce these disparities, these development gaps? And finally, and I will follow the suggestion of Joseph, what might be the contribution of Central and Eastern European countries and studies conducted in our countries to understanding the relationship between regional development process and public intervention. So let me start from these graphs that show how global financial crisis in 2008 and change the picture of divisions in Europe. What is the most striking is that the former axis of these divisions, or north-south, is again a very important one. What's more, we can see is that after the crisis, in a few years after the crisis, the process of catching up of Central and Eastern European countries has halted. And only in recent years, we again could observe a convergence process. And finally, we can see a new division between EU member states and those countries who are accession countries, which can have some opportunity to join EU in the future. So we have different types of division. And why these divisions are important? These divisions at country level are important because looking at the European Union as a whole and looking at the convergence and divergence processes at the regional level, we can find a very strict correlation between these two processes. And this applies to the convergence before the crisis, thanks to catching up process of Central and Eastern European countries, as well as divergence after the crisis, in this case, as a result of poor performance of Southern European countries. But recent years brought us something new, in a sense that on the one hand, we have convergence at country level and quite stable differences in regional level. And I will explain you why. And maybe this explains also what Joseph just addressed. While in Spain, in Italy, we see such a huge interest in regional studies, because take a look at this slide and you will see that these two countries experience the change, a turning point from decreasing internal disparities to, again, regional divergence. And it's quite easily visible. While we have some countries in which we have regional convergence almost for all the time analyzed, like Finland, Germany, some countries in which we had the opposite, like Romania, France, Greece, and Poland. And many countries from Central and Eastern Europe who changed the situation from divergence to convergence. But even looking in Poland, in which we could observe a divergence, using different indicators, we may find that this is not the whole story. Looking at personal income taxes, looking at the salaries, we can find that even we have this regional convergence, divergence of GDP, we still have convergence regarding salaries, regarding personal incomes, means that the differences are changing. So we should remember that GDP is not the only indicator we can use to analyze this. And well, we may ask, what are the determinants of these changes, of these internal disparities within particular countries? Well, GDP at country level doesn't explain us the situation. Before 2008, yes, Williamson hypothesis was confirmed in a sense that in case of Central and Eastern European countries, we had a fast growth and growing divergence among the regions. Growth rate at country level, that may be related to polarized development theories, metropolization. In recent years, so after 2010, didn't play so important role. Allocation of cohesion policy fund, scale of cohesion policy fund. Well, clearly a potential impact and role on regional policy in reducing changes, difference in development level. Apparently, it would not have impact. Why? We can ask why, and many reports shows that there are some relations between cohesion policy and regional development, but it seems that there are only apparent relation related to the fact that we could observe a fast development and rapid development of Central and Eastern European countries, especially in the period before the crisis, And at the same time, we allocated cohesion policy funds to these countries, but, well, we allocated the funds actually after the crisis, because the first result of the European funds was rather visible after the crisis, not before the crisis. Obviously, we had some demand effects before, but only in a few years before. And while looking within the group of countries, we can clearly see that such relationship doesn't exist. We have on the one hand Romania, on the other hand we have Hungary. So just to wrap up our knowledge about the cohesion policy and regional development, based mainly on papers published in Regional Studies Journal, well, the general message is that we should rather look for some determinants of success rather than trying to find an overall impact of cohesion policy. This is related to many problems. First, heterogeneity of interventions, both regarding thematic scope and regional range. Then, high importance of regional context, and especially including the quality of institutions. Thirdly, significant importance of the national context, as I already presented, and also the spatial scale of analysis, because looking at the regions and looking at the functional urban areas or sub-regions, we may find different results. Obviously, there are other policies, both national and European, especially common agriculture policy, that, well, as overlapping, changing the final results. And finally, and what I would like to address in the next slide, are direct and indirect impact of the intervention. So let's say demand and supply effects, whether the money we spend on cohesion policy lead to changes in the regional structures to make them more competitive. And well, just recently, and I was talking to Joseph that he used the same citation from the paper, a paper elaborated by a group of colleagues from Central and Eastern European countries was published, showing two very important things: that regarding demand effects, we could observe that they are only for a short period of time visible, while supply effects, long-term effects, are very minor, even if exist. I like these conclusions because these conclusions corroborates the result of research we conducted in Poland, and together with Grzegorz Gorzelak, focus on the role of cohesion policy. And why so? The answer probably is related to the structural differences between the regions in Central and Eastern European countries that quite effectively prevent European Union support from reducing these differences in level of development. In this paper, we can find two recommendations. So first recommendations, more effective national strategies should be developed for regional restructuring. And the second one, that perhaps we should use this objective of regional restructuring within implementation of cohesion policy. And now we have our conference. In which we had many excellent papers. I tried to attend as many sessions as it was possible. I looked through the abstracts, so perhaps some of you will find his or her name in this slide. Well, if I miss something, let's just take a floor in a discussion and add something. I try to find which directions of our study may provide an important contribution to regional studies. So I think that we can find at least 6 such directions. First is related to the factors of regional development. We have both exogenous factors of this development and endogenous factors of this development. And looking at the interplay between them, we could provide interesting knowledge to the understanding of changes in regional disparities across different countries. Second is the role of urban centers and the restructuring, and the role of these urban centers in regional development processes. Third one is the role of migration, out and in migration, and their role in regional development. Also, as Joseph addressed this directly, the restructuring strategies for large regions. These smart specialization strategies are considered as not a proper solution to address these issues. Whether we can think about other solution, maybe innovative solution to propose to be implemented. Then we have the relations between benefits of EU integration processes that include institutional framework and capacity versus cohesion policy. And for all the time, as I also presented at the beginning, we still have this gap. We still are a semi-periphery country and regions. So still there is plenty of space to analyze these core periphery relations. Well, regarding future directions, one should mention Ukraine and hopefully after war, post-war regional and urban renewal. And hopefully that one of the next CEC conferences could be held in Ukraine with a special focus to this subject, to this topic. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Maciej, for your reflections and remarks. And we'll again jump to the next speaker. Petya Slavova has a PhD in political science from the Free University of Brussels and is currently an associate professor at Sofia University St. Clement Ochotski, where she teaches sociology of work and research methods in social sciences. Petya has analyzed the post-socialist transformations of urban space in rural areas in Bulgaria, so that's part of your main expertise, and we're curious to learn about your reflections.
Thank you, Thilo. Thank you of organizers to invited me to participate in this conference, and thank you for all of you for coming to this last session. Actually, Thilo sent us questions. I don't know, this can't move. Several questions to reflect on them, and he mentioned what I should do. And he mentioned them at the beginning of this session. If you forgot them, they are here, the full list, just to have a stuff to reflect. And I will try to share with you my reflections about some of these questions. But before to start, I would like to precise that, as Thilo said, I'm not a geographer or economist like many of you in this room. I'm a sociologist, and probably my perspective is quite different from yours. And then the second thing is that when I use the term region, I refer mainly to post-socialist countries, and excluding Eastern Germany and now Germany. So the same with when I use the term CEC region. So what about the divide between Eastern and Western scholarship and the way we're doing scientific research? Actually, it would be indeed be hard to say that this divide is disappeared. And according to me, it has two aspects. The first one is conceptual one, and I will go back to this later in my presentation. And the second one, sorry, is I call this cultural aspects of East-West divide. And what I mean by culture is these are the conditions under which we are working and the way we conduct research in post-socialist countries. So it may seem trivial or strange, but first among I will try to explain why this divide actually exists and how it became probably deep, I don't know. But to do this, I will refer mainly to three aspects, and it may be strange or trivial for you, but the first among the factors contributing, according to me, to this divide is the access to literature and the research, culture, and practices that have been formed in post-socialist countries. And in particular, I have an example of Bulgaria in my hand. Actually, in Bulgaria, but also I know in most of the Western Balkan countries and probably elsewhere, the access is very limited, and big global providers of scholarly literature, such as Elsevier, have been courting governments for many years. And in some of them, such as Bulgaria and Hungary, as far as I know, they have managed to negotiate national contracts for access to their databases, albeit only for 5 years back. And please note that universities and researchers are not allowed to select the sources they need themselves. The state does it for us. And actually, the lack of access to literature have forced many people from the region to move to work in the West and to find better conditions. Of course, to work, but actually this difficult access to literature and to sources is often behind of what Joseph mentioned. Probably it is related to low level of publication, of invisibility of what we're doing in these post-socialist countries of the region. And I, for the purposes of this intervention, I tried one experiment. Actually, I coded all 97 abstracts for this conference, which are on the website of the conference. And I found that the majority of actually of the presentations were delivered by scholars working in institutions not in the region, but in Western countries. And 7 papers were the results of collaboration between researchers from Western and Eastern countries. Of course, this is very speculative because the war in Ukraine has certainly prevented many colleagues from Russia and from other countries to come here. But nevertheless, we can't help but know that where you do science undoubtedly influence how we do science. And we probably also can hypothesize behind these figures that the limited access to knowledge can explain why, for example, in countries like Bulgaria and probably in the regions, regional studies does not exist a specific discipline beyond the urban-rural divides and respectively urban-rural and agricultural research. So I think that my impression listening to presentations here at this conference is that its contribution is that it was able to attract many regional participants who work in Western institutions and thus gave a chance to get to know the region better. And I wasn't able to quote this type of data to tell you what part of these participants form this group, but more importantly, these scholars are actively contributing to bridging the East divide we're talking now. And Dorothee Bell also mentioned this yesterday in his presentations. So the second factor which contributes to the survival and probably of the deepness of this East-West divide, is related to what I call the ambivalent influence of project-type science, which become popular in the region, again in the post-socialist countries, and what Boltanski and Chiapelou called cité par projet, or projective city, as it was translated in their book. And this term also became popular as projectification. Actually, I think everyone guessed that I'm talking about project-funded science from various European and international programs relying on international consortia. And we should admit that this type of projects funding is important, but also that this put too many constraints on the independent research practices. At best, these type of projects support data registration and analysis according to often predefined comparative methodologies following pre-formulated concepts. Probably not all of them, but the big majority, and Gergely Tagai this afternoon also mentioned this in his presentation. This type of research, with a few exceptions, such as ERC grants, for example, or Marie Skłodowska-Curie, focuses on exploring the outcomes of transformations, but does not try to understand the processes behind, the local culture, and the reasons that lead to these outcomes. These types of projects are very often furthermore focused on showcasing the so-called good or best practices to be used as examples of how to achieve by others, but however they fail to see how these best practices are achieved. And recently I have encountered this problem myself when researching the impact of cultural heritage in rural areas, and all data that we collected showed that the end result was indeed positive from the intervention in cultural heritage in rural area. And actually, it was achieved through non-transparent and questionable mechanisms by a construction company with a questionable reputation, to say the least. And if we want to stick to scientific standards, we are forced to collect twice as much data and write twice as much reports and papers, one for reporting to the project donor best practices he asked us, and other for our scientific consciousness. Listening presentations delivered on this conference, my impression is that it makes a contribution, the conference makes a contribution because it has managed to attract scholars and presentations based on PhD research projects and locally developed projects focused to explore processes and culture leading, for example, to the non-capitalist practices and diverse economies, and including informal activities. And this is a contribution, according to me, to more deep understanding on the ongoing processes in the region, and this allows us to go beyond the so-called best practices. The third point I will mention in relation to explain why this divide between East and West is still surviving. This is the importance of concepts we are using to describe what happened in post-socialist countries. Actually, my impression listening different contribution is that sometimes we face difficulties, we experience difficulties to better explain the link between sea ontologies, between what we observe on the field, and to concepts we are trying to apply to give sense of the data that we collected. And actually, I am completely here in line with what Nancy Condé already said, and I will not repeat. You can read this. This is on the slide. I think in this direction, this conference also have its specific contributions, because papers presented try to make at least these that I had chance to follow and to hear and to participate in the discussions. These papers, these interventions try to make their own contribution in this way, arriving at the conclusions about the increased role of local actors and their cultures, through which we can understand what is happening in sea and what is sea today as a region. But it seems that we are still at a stage where we are identifying the need to develop such an authentic concepts, to go beyond the recognition of the importance of the local and to go deeper behind what we consider as local. And it's become more and more important actually to reflect on this question. As Henry told us during his opening speech, we cannot all be the global we cannot be all in the global semiconductor chains. We have to focus on the local because that is often where our strength is. But to do this, we need first to discover what is this local which matters. So what seems, and I will finish here by saying that what seems to me possible to do in response to enrich our scientific vocabulary, our conceptual approaches, how to understand better and in these circumstances sea regions, we can do at least two things. The first one is to reinvent and build on existing concepts developed in the region. And I have to admit here that I was surprised by the lack of reference, at least again, based on my experience with the session I had chance to follow, by the lack of experience and reference to one of the most popular conceptual framework and concepts that was developed specifically to understanding the processes in the region. And this is the concept of recombination and of innovative bricolage of Laszlo Borust and David Stark. And the second thing we need we can do to go deeper in this in our attempts to better know what is happening in the region, is also to try to better explain what we mean by local actors, and more precisely to go deeper in their moral grammar. This is an expression I'm borrowing from Boltanski et Thévenot, but actually they describe this moral grammar for Western actors and for Western people, but my impression is that it is missing for Western and for post-socialist countries. So in conclusion, we are on the right way, but we have also a lot of work to perform, I think. Thank you.
Thank you for your valuable thoughts. I would now like to invite all the three speakers to join me here in front. And we still have something like 30 minutes to open the discussion, focus on points that you heard in the three inputs, challenge some points that you heard, and also go beyond based on your own impressions on the past days and of course also your general work. We have 2 microphones in the room. I'm not sure if there's an option to pose questions via Zoom. So if so, I would need somebody to report. Who would like to start with a question or remark? Please also give us your name and background and to whom you address your question, if it's a question or not just a comment.
Milenko Petrovic, University of Canterbury, New Zealand. Questions for the last 2 speakers. I mean, I'm originally from former Yugoslavia, but I've been living in 22 years over there and teaching and researching on European integrations and post-communist transition. So I have some experience of growing up in the socialism or communism. and then teaching and researching and writing for the Western publications and so on. So my question, I mean, to the last speaker, Professor from Slavova, I agree fully with what you said about reconceptualization of Central European studies, but I think I would advise, I mean, this is my opinion, that researchers and academics from the East should also try to adopt some concepts which are developed in the West, actually to better understand Western understanding of the Eastern Europe, because Western publications dominate with Anglo-Saxons researchers and academics, and there are some terminological differences. I mean, using of terms, and in that explain also approach to the problems and topics. For example, most of you, if not all of you, when you use in your presentation, term post-socialist country or post-socialism. Well, Western academics, Americans and British use the term post-communism. And the difference is quite substantial. Coming from the former socialist country, I thought they are wrong. But actually, then I figure out that actually they are more right to call this post-communist, not post-socialist. Because socialism in the Western terminology in academia is related to the democratic society with the strong role of the government, welfare states, and so on, so like Swedish model, even German social democracy, and so on. While the totalitarian regimes in the East, which were command type systems with the full monopoly of communist parties, were communist, not in the sense of Marxist definition of communism as the full state of classless society or the second phase, by socialism is actually Marx's first phase of communism, so-called rough communism. So in that terms, because they were ruled by the Communist Party and communist ideology, this society were communist, not because they reached the Marxist term or full communism. So this is some example of how to bridge some differences and maybe be better present, I mean, in the Western autonomous media. And for the colleague from Warsaw, you finished your presentation saying the next step is helping Ukraine to post-war rebuild. What about the Western Balkans? Are they out of the radar screens or?
How to proceed to answer now? Thank you very much for this question. Actually, according to my knowledge, the debates how to call the period between 44 and 1989 is still open, and this is a conceptual questions depending on how we approach what we are analyzing. But I'm not sure that we'll close the divide between Eastern and Western terminology when proceeding through homogenization of how we call the phenomenon we are studying. So I use this term here. It was not my object of problematization here, and I didn't enter into debates why I use this term. But and this is why I will not provide additional argument to say this was just to describe the period and actually the type of society that the communist regime wanted to build.
Yes, thank you for your comment. Well, obviously, I hope that the message from my presentation clearly shows the benefits of EU integration. And looking at the slide I presented, well, and clearly showed a new division between the Central and Eastern European countries that became a member of the European Union and the rest. So obviously the message is that the sooner the chances of these countries be greater to be a member of the European Union, the sooner the positive process of development would start there. So yeah, that's the message.
Okay, so I guess you had enough time to consider your questions, so maybe we take 2, 3 from the audience together now, and please feel free to voice comments, issues, or questions to the speakers. So we have one at the very back.
Zoltán, Hungary. Most of you mentioned this East-West scientific divide. So do you think, is it a generational issue which is easy to overcome as the time being, or is it an institutional issue, or is it a funding issue, or kind of problem of knowledge accumulation? Even if I'm familiar with the dependent market economic concept, and those German professors who developed this concept had a comparison with state permeated economies, which mostly refers to some BRICS countries and emerging markets, peers of Central Eastern European countries in East Asia. And the biggest difference was found that these countries, even EU members of the European Union, spend much less on education, particularly on higher education and innovation, than not just the West, but these kind of emerging new reindustrializing countries. So what do you think about how to overcome?
Okay, there's another question here at the front, and we take the lady first for the gender balance, and then Tadeusz.
Nadia Hanisova, Czech Republic. I liked what Petya Ivanova about what you said about the diachronic the temporalities and about the different logics which pervade and which we should be looking for, which pervade the different spheres of life. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on this a little bit. I found that rather inspiring.
Did you get the point, or do we need more detail to the question? Good. Then we take Tadeusz as well.
Thank you, Tadeusz Jakiewicz from Poland. My question is very simple, but it relates directly to the title of our conference, Old and New Divides. So I would like to focus on the question, what divides, in your opinion, can be called old, that is related to the past, and what divides, in your opinion, are new ones? Yeah, so emerging divides. Just very short remarks in this matter. Thank you.
Do you address this question to everybody, or? Okay. So shall we start with Petya for the question from here, then go to Maciej and Josef.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for this question. Actually, when listening and reading the abstracts for this conference, I found that only in very few isolated abstracts and presentations, I found history and historical legacy to be mentioned as important explanation of what we are observing. But at the same time, many of us were speaking about the importance of local actors, of regions, of biographies. And it seems to me that we can't reinvent what is local and regional without going back to diversity in our histories, and more precisely, without going back to diversities in our common post-socialist history. And to try to understand them better in the context of current temporalities, which are the temporalities of 30 years of post-socialist transformations. This is what I mentioned by diachronic temporalities. And regarding to the second questions about old and new divides, actually for me, The old divide is the divide between Eastern and Western understandings and countries, but focused only on Europe. And the new divide should take into account the so-called Eastern forces like China or Russia and their influence in our societies, but also one new divide, which is very well noticed now in Bulgaria. This is the divide induced by disinformation and propaganda. Actually, there are, during the 3 last years, there are very serious publications which appear showing that there is a very strong forces of political engineering in at least in my society, which try to change the agenda of the society itself and to replace it with other questions. And through this work of disinformation, mainly driven by parties and NGOs distributing Putin's propaganda and conservative reflections on family and everyday life and so on, actually they trying to turn the public opinion and to replace it with new questions and issues. This is for me the new divide, and the old one is still probably on the table.
Answering the question, the questions raised by Zoltan, I think that there is also a generational change, and the upwards tendency of the presence of CE authors in the publications is due to the fact that younger people had their PhD training programs in Western institutions and have turned back to their countries of origin, and of course also the collaborative research between Eastern and Western European institutions due to the Marie Curie initiatives or to the Horizon projects were all very important mechanisms which resulted in a generational shift and differential understanding of the role of knowledge creation and knowledge dissemination between generations. I don't like very much this categorization, because we have still also, let's say, older generations contributing to this knowledge creation. But the effort from the younger scientists is very visible. This is probably also the future trend, which must be sustained and supported. So this was one question. You have addressed the question of institutions. I have said yes, of course. I think that having research institutions or research centers in the field of regional studies, regional science, has played and will play an important role. It is exactly the situation in Hungary where such an institution have been established a long time ago. And although the history and the role of this institution has changed, I think that it will remain a main contributor in the case of Hungary, and it is understandable the reason. Regarding the question on old and new divisions, I haven't speak about old and new divisions. I think that there are some divisions, or I would like say it is to maybe too hard to formulate with using this concept of divisions. I would say there are differences, And there are different factors behind these differences. I would, using this differentiation between old and new, I would say that old divisions were related basically to political factors like the Cold War and the political divisions which have separated these two parts of Europe for so long. But I see also new differences, new divisions created by the fact that human resources and financial resources are increasingly concentrating in the top universities and research institutions. If you look what is happening with the best students from Eastern Europe, indeed, if you follow their mobility trajectories, this tendency is clear. Research institutions and universities in Eastern Europe, generally, with few exceptions, are not very attractive working places and working environments. So long this brain drain will continue, we have to face this situation. So I see rather a division, but in terms of social division, and this concerns this concentration of human resources and financial resources in certain places. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to address Tadeusz's question in geographical terms. We had Iron Curtain, and then we still have some results of this Iron Curtain, but we also have a Golden Curtain on the border of the European Union, and it's kind of a important division. And this Iron Curtain may move now to the borders of Russia. So our region and Europe as such would be much different than it was. Yeah, that's from geographical, let's say, point of view, my comment.
I would just like to step in with a brief question to add on your expertise, Maciej. You have been one of the big players from an Eastern European country in shaping cohesion policy. So I think I would be interested to share some of your experience and what you think. How big is the Eastern voice in shaping cohesion policy now? Well, at the very beginning, it was not so much possible, but with your center, you managed to become a big voice. Is this an exception? Do you think this is balanced? Do you think in terms of the knowledge production and the acceptance of this knowledge at policy level, are we on a good way? Have we achieved already what we needed to achieve, or how exceptional is your stage in this process?
Well, first I must say, well, I was not really involved in shaping cohesion policy, unfortunately. Yeah, but well, what I can share with you is that we have a problem with cohesion policy in a sense that, or even in general, public investments. Because, well, I said that there's no supply effects of these funds. The problem is even larger, that sometimes we have negative supply effects of these funds. In the case in which we build some infrastructure or create some institutions that we don't really need as a public sector, and then we have to spend a lot of money to maintain them. And this reduces our chances to invest this money to increase our revenues, which we need to maintain these new institutions and new infrastructure. So that's a big deal. But obviously, well, I didn't mention it. Well, I'm talking about cohesion policy in economic terms, looking at the quality of life, looking at also on the impact, certain impact on institutional capacity, some intangible effects. Yes, then we can find a real significant impact of cohesion policy. But unfortunately, regarding cohesion policy as a development policy, there are not so many good, let's say, news.
Thanks. We collect again maybe 3-4 questions, and this will be the last round also to raise comments and issues and ask questions. We have 2 here at the front. We can take 2 more. Please keep your questions short. We'll keep the answers as short as possible to give as much space as possible for comments. You go first, please.
Thank you. My name is Monika Bobako. I come from Poland, and I was one of the co-organizers of the roundtable entitled "In Need for More Exchange and Open Discussion on the Research Collaboration Between East and West." And I have to say that lots of our observation actually are parallel to what you said in the last presentation. About the problems and the barriers in cooperation between West and East. But apart from, obviously, we focused a lot on the issue of unequal distribution of resources, which is pretty crucial, and also on language, but not as a technical barrier, but more as something linked with cultural, political hegemony that is linked with English language academia. And the things that some participants were emphasizing was about the fact that this dominance of English language academia, the fact that we are speaking English and basically reading authors who are recognized in this academic sphere, is one of the elements of the hegemony, which results in the fact that very often scholars from the peripheral region are coming to the center, and we've got the situation in which peripheral scholars are obliged to know the canon, the authors from the center, but the authors from the centers are not obliged to know authors from the periphery. So we as peripheral scholars go to the center to discuss authors from the center with other researchers from the center. Yeah? So this in itself creates some form of inequality apart from this technical aspect of language. Yeah? So that's something about hegemony, and hegemony is also linked with political issues that underpin cooperation. Yeah? One of my examples was that the end of the Cold War meant reorientation of Polish academia towards the West, which meant that all the links that we had before with the third world or developing countries were completely abandoned. Before 1989, my university had lots of exchange with Arab countries, African countries, etc., etc. Then nobody cared because it stopped to be valued. It was completely unnecessary. No money went there. There was no political reason. So when we talk about internationalism now, it is not just internationalism. It is about linking us with the West, but we are not linked between each other. Yeah? So all peripheral countries tend to go to the Western centers, and we are not connected between each other. So that was one of the observations that appeared. And yeah, also we've got something called global division of intellectual labor, which means that basically theory comes from the center and empirical evidence comes from the periphery. Yeah. So which means that when we are framing research, we are using categories and theoretical frameworks constructed in the center because we want to be included, so we have to be legible for the center, etc., etc. So you've got this kind of consequences of this hegemony, which is not just reducible to the financial situation. And the last thing I wanted to say is that this hegemonic situation is also influencing what is happening in our higher education system within countries. So now, I mean, in Poland, we've got this pressure, very strong pressure, institutional pressure to publish in recognized English language journals. One result is predatory journals, development of the predatory journals, and the fact that peripheral scholars mainly fall prey to this kind of things. Yeah, you know, etc., etc. It's something that shapes the internal dynamics in academic life as well. And I suppose it's important to discuss what's happening with local situation when everyone wants to be included in the center. Yeah? Don't we abandon the realities on the ground? Yeah? But many other issues to discuss in connection with the concept of hegemony. Yeah?
Thank you very much, Monica, for sharing your thoughts and also summarizing this obviously exciting panel discussion. We're coming close to the end, so last chance to make some points. Okay, we have Nadia and one in the back. To close this up, give our panelists a chance to respond. Please keep it short. Nadia first, and then microphone goes up, please.
Yeah, thanks a lot for the input. I'm Nadir Kinosian from Leibniz Institute for Regional Geography in Leipzig. That discussion about East-West divide, it is presented sometimes as some kind of, strange, unhappy union where the Western side is happy and sufficient, and Eastern side is unhappy and blaming the West for its dominant position, Anglo-Saxon knowledge production complex, etc., and some sort of self-victimization practice, I would say. But in bridging that divide, what would be the motivation of the West to make some effort to bridge it? Because it looks like the East is banging against some wall and the West is not willing to make a step forward, as it sometimes sounds.
Sounds like a very heavy wall.
Yes, thank you, Lucia Sobova. I just have a comment, and it's a brief one. I really liked in the last presentation how Petja addressed some of the reasons for this inequality that we see in knowledge production. And I think at this conference we talked a lot about the conceptual divides, but I think it's also good to remind ourselves of the more practical divides, such as funding, as other people have also brought up. And I find it very curious that you say that actually, taking this conference as a case, there's actually more scholars based in the West. And, being one of them, for me, it was very convenient to come to Leipzig. And I'm also very happy to have learned about the research done here on Central and Eastern Europe. But within the region, this is actually a very Western location, which possibly was not easily accessible for many Eastern scholars. So maybe that's something to take to the next RSA conference on Central and Eastern Europe. Thanks.
Thanks for these three voices. I'm sorry, I think I have to close for now, but we do have the closing party. Keep your question to the closing party, please. I would like to give you a chance to have some kind of final words if you want so. And then we'll have some closing words on our behalf.
If it wasn't obvious, I would address clearly, I haven't blamed the West, I have blamed the East. Facts are facts, statistics are statistics, but I turn back always to factors related to Eastern Europe. And I think so that these conferences are linking us. You have said we are going to the West, but we are among us a little bit, and we are building, or we are trying to build bridges between individual countries from Central and Eastern Europe. This is the sense, I think, of this conference series. So we should continue on this line. Thank you.
The only thing I will say is thank you very much, sincerely. thank you again for I've read all abstracts and attended only small portion of interventions, but I learned a lot during these 3 days. So thank you for all your efforts.
Yeah, maybe my final comment would be that, well, we have many opportunities for scientific cooperations. Let's use it. Let's change the graph. Petya showed that only 6 papers were in cooperation between East and West.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Let's give us a warm applause to our speakers in this last session. I will leave you to your seats. Now it's time to say not finally goodbye, because we still have the closing party tonight, but some of you might have to leave. I would like to have Leila on the stage as well. We're looking back to fascinating inputs, a wonderful conference, and at least from what I could get from the conference. I'll just hand over to you, Leila, for your last 2-3 sentences, and then we have Sally for a couple of words. I need the mic in between.
I don't even need to say sentences. I just want to once more very genuinely thank you for being here and making this conference. I know that you had enough of me, so I won't talk so much. Yeah, I hope that many of you will be there to celebrate with us, but I'll leave the floor.
Yeah, of course, this final words are also needed to take a little bit of time to say thank you to everybody who has contributed to making this conference work, not only content-wise. We have a large number of student supporters, technical supporters. Those in the room, maybe just raise your hands that we can see from those people. Dare to raise your hands that you helped us. I want to ask 4 people to join us here at the front to, well, give them a little bit more credit because they did such a lot of work. And the first one is Lena Dellywater, who did coordinate all the EGA activities, invested a really lot of work in making this part of the conference happy. I do have some sweets for you. Thank you very much. Check the website, Eastern Europe Global Area. There are a couple of nice fellowship opportunities as well if you want to come back to Leipzig. Franziska Görmer did a lot of work and a lot of technical organizational details. Thank you very much. Thanks for linking the Accor project and supporting at so many ends. And of course, we have Nicola and Daniela who made all technically and atmospherically happening well and nicely. And I also have 2 boxes of chocolate for you. Thank you very much for this fantastic collaboration and support, and it made it for us as the local team very productive and very nice to engage for this.
I just want to say for those who are taking part in the excursion tomorrow, so we are meeting near to the main station, and it's called Goethestraße. There are bus stops where you should easily find. It's really in the city center. And yeah, for the closing reception, come to Plug. It's my home quarter, so I would be happy to welcome you there.
And there are free drinks and free food. And now I'll hand over to you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Thilo. Colleagues, I won't keep you from the evening festivities or your travel home, but I think we should really recognise the work that Thilo and Leila have done, among many other people. They've thanked everybody. We thanked the sponsors at the beginning, but I think we should thank Thilo and Leila, and please join me in doing that. So I've always wanted to come to Leipzig, as I said in the opening session. I love Leipzig. It's a completely different city to the city I thought it would be. I arrived thinking it would be post-industrial, kind of dark, and it's actually extremely beautiful, very elegant boulevards, marvelous food, too many bars, and I've been in too many of them. I've had a fantastic time. It's a great city, and this is a great conference. And at RSA, we always say that this conference has a special atmosphere. The first two certainly felt warm and supportive, and I think this conference has continued that tradition. So I would like to close by thanking all of you for making this such a great few days and for being our first face-to-face conference following the horror of COVID. So thank you very much and safe travels home. Thank you.